it does a lot of damage to your self-worth and self-esteem. The other piece of it is when I went home to like tell my parents what was going on, the first thing that my father said was, "What did you do?" So
first of all, thank you, Cindy, for coming, and welcome to the show. And so we just dive in. Just let's start with, what is it that you do?
okay, so a lot of different things. Mostly the focus is on women's wellness. So looking at a woman from a holistic perspective, so that physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm a transformational life coach. I'm also a certified yoga therapist, yoga teacher. I'm a Reiki master teacher and an EFT practitioner. So that's my mainstay now. But before that, I spent about 35 years actually working in the preventative medicine and therapeutic medicine arena, wearing lots of different hats. And this was my sideline passion for many, many years. What got me started was I went through a really major heartbreaking divorce, probably about 30 some odd years ago. And that was the beginning of my personal journey into health and wellness, because it really broke me emotionally and mentally. And so it just started this whole journey for me to like be well, because I was left with a small child. My ex and I split when my daughter was about 9 months old. And so that was the beginning of this. And just so for me, it's all of the things that I have learned going through that whole process, because it's been 30 some odd years now of all the different paths that I've taken to like enrich and pull myself into a really healthy place. That's what I want to offer to other women, so that they too can just feel really good about themselves, live their best lives and move through some of the negative messaging and programming that I think most of us as women have experienced throughout our lives. So that's my ultimate desire and wish and goal.
So what happened with you specifically?
So I was with my ex-husband 9 years. We made a decision to start a family. And throughout the pregnancy, I found out that he was actually having an affair on me. So that we split for a little bit, then we got back together right as I was having our daughter. And 3 months afterwards, he had affair number 2. And so for me, I just couldn't accept that. I was like, no, this is not how I'm going to live. This is not who I am or what I want to be. And so we split. And of course, it was, again, very heartbreaking to me, because I think when you go through a divorce and the significant other, your spouse, has cheated on you, it does a lot of damage to your self-worth and self-esteem. The other piece of it is when I went home to like tell my parents what was going on, the first thing that my father said was, "What did you do?" So it was like, what do you mean? What did I do? So it was this whole blame and shame. Of course, I'm sure he regretted it after he said that. But I really took that to heart. And so that ended up manifesting into this perfectionism. It was almost like, and it wasn't even conscious at the time, but I went into this whole modality of perfectionism because I thought, I must not be pretty enough. I must not be smart enough. I must not be a good enough wife. I went through all of these things that I must not be. And so I thought, well, the only way that I'm lovable, right, because I felt I wasn't lovable, is I got to be perfect. And so I just kept striving, and I got into this whole, strive. And it's one thing to like want to be your best self, but when it's this obsession running in the background of, striving to be better because you have all of this insecurity that you're not worthy or good enough, two totally different things. And so, it took me a while to get out of that. And it put me right into what I call the masculine energy, because I just went right into survival mode because I was alone. I didn't have a lot of support. My parents lived, an hour and a half away. So I didn't have like hands-on support readily available to me. And so I just like put my head down there was a lot of emotions going. I just tucked them. Really good at tucking. I became a master at tucking all of my feelings. It was like, oh, I don't have time to feel that now. Boom, 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 boom. And just again, put my head down and said, this is what I have to do to survive. And it was not easy. It was really not easy because my ex left me with debt. He quit his full-time job, so I wasn't getting the child support that I needed. So, I mean, it was just this whole cascade of like worrying about the finances. Again, who's going to want me? I went through this whole thing of like, who's going to want somebody who is divorced with an infant, no less. So it was just, again, all of this very much put the shield up, armored up big time, and went into complete survival mode. And I think when you get into that mode for a long period of time, it's really difficult then to move back into more of your feminine energy, and allowing, somebody to kind of like come in and be a champion and take care of you, because I did not trust men. It was like, absolutely not. I am remarried now. I've been with my now husband for many, many years, but it affected my, relationship with him as well, because I didn't really trust. He was almost too good to be true. I was like, when's the other shoe gonna fall off? So I had to work through all of that as well. Like, how do I welcome this person in with a child? Because I was really concerned about being a good mom. And so, of course, I didn't want to bring in some other kind of emotional component into that as well. So it was, again, a lot of navigating. How do you date again? How do you trust again? How do you really trust yourself again? So to me, this has been, again, just this whole, that was like the starting point, but this whole journey of how do I become whole again? One of the other things that I did, because I was financially, I mean, I can remember there were weeks when I literally had $10 after I paid all of the bills and took care of my daughter. I had $10 to get me through a week. So I literally was living on carrots, apples, and like little cups of yogurt. I mean, I lost like a ton of weight. Not a recommended way, I might say, of losing weight. But it was, that's where I was. So one of the things that I did is I knew that I just needed to, take care of myself physically and emotionally. So I couldn't work out at the gym anymore because I didn't have the money to pay for the membership. So what I did is I saved up money and became a fitness instructor. So this way I could get a workout in, I could make money teaching a class, and they had a daycare so I could bring my daughter. So it was like win, 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 win. So I was like looking for ways to get really resourceful, so that I could literally take care of myself and earn extra money on the side. And that was the very first side hustle, if you will, that again, just took me down this whole path of wholeness, wellness, etc. Of course, reading all kinds of self-help books at the time. Yeah, I could go on and on and on.
Yeah. There's always so much more to the story. But
Yeah.
you know what, even those days there wasn't a lot of resource, and even now I don't think there is a lot, because there's so much presented, but how do you know what's right? Because there's so many conflicting ways of dealing with things. So how did you manage to, in fact, let's just go back even more, because obviously if you'd married a person like that, it comes from childhood. So where did that stem from you on your side? Because that low self-worth was what you married with already.
Well, so I came from a household, a very American 50s style household. So my father was very authoritarian in his way. It was like his way or the highway. My mother was basically a doormat, to be blunt. It was, whatever he wanted. And so she wasn't allowed to even like work outside of the house. She finally got a job when I was 13 so that I could take care of, I have two younger brothers at the time, so I could be the babysitter. And he basically wasn't having any of it. Now I'm talking about my father. He wasn't going to have any of it. And that's when he had his first affair on my mom. So I think it was kind of this whole learned, again, as you say, it's a lot of programming, right? This is where it all starts. It's all the programming from when we're really little And then it just gets layered and layered and layered upon, in terms of adulthood, societal, cultural, institutional norms of how we're supposed to behave. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's familiar. You think I'm not going to find somebody who's going to cheat on me, but it's what your subconscious mind knows.
Yeah.
So okay, so you've got divorced. So I'm going to assume that going and getting work and that helps you get on your feet. But what was your turning point? Was there any defining moments that happened where you realized I do have self-worth, or did it come from outside?
Um, Interesting that you say that. So yeah, I think the turning point for me was when I discovered yoga. So it took a while. I mean, this is a long process, right? To like really find self-worth and be into a place where you really love yourself fully, flaws and all. And it took a good number of years. So for me, it was all external, right? So again, when you get into the perfectionism mode, you're seeking validation actually externally. It's like all of the validation externally. When I discovered yoga, that was like complete turning point. It was like, oh my gosh, I'll never forget the very first yoga class I took was a Kundalini class. And it was a colleague because I had a full-time job. I was working in clinical research, and one of my fellow colleagues, he was a yoga instructor on the side. He's like, Cindy, come to one of my classes. So I came in and I gotta tell you, it was strange, because it wasn't a workout. I'm used to like, doing, aerobics kinds of routines or athletic conditioning, working out with weights. And this was like sitting for the most of it. And we didn't do a lot of physical, different things physically, but it was a lot of breathing and chanting. And we sang a song. We actually ate an apple at the end of it. But what was really interesting to me is when I walked out of that class, I literally felt like I was floating. It was like, oh my gosh, like what just happened in there? And I was like, I need me more of that. And so that took me down this whole path then of like getting certified in yoga. And so I spent a good number of years doing all of those qualifications. But I think that was the big turning point for me internally. It was like, it's not about what's on the outside. I really need to do inner work right now and find the inner peace. And so that's literally, I think to me, was the pivotal moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to assume you were dating for a while and then you met your husband, or did you just meet him? How did that happen? I'm asking, and I'll tell you why I'm asking, because a lot of people that have been in that kind of relationship are telling me they're too afraid to date. They're afraid they're going to land up in the same relationship again with a different name, but the same person, right? So how do yes, you can learn the red flags, but like you said, you're going to keep waiting for the shoe to drop.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, so I dated. Um, I My friends set me up. Basically, that's how I dated. It was like friends set me up, and I was like, again, I really had this mentality because my daughter was so young. It was like, I don't need anybody. Like, I don't need to like love anybody else because I have this child to like focus all of my energy on. Um, yeah, so it took a while. It ended up, so how did I meet my husband? Well, he was actually my aerobics instructor. He was my aerobics instructor while I was pregnant because I was like this really go-getter, high core, A++er personality. And he was like the low impact person, and so you get to a certain point in your pregnancy where they're like, well, you can't get your heart rate up and your blood pressure will go up. So I went into these like lower forms of workouts, and very sweet guy, never thought anything of it. And I'll just remember that I had separated and it had been several months, and our aerobics group was like it was like a family. It was a little family, which was really nice. And so his birthday, a lot of the girls were like taking him out for his birthday, and he was like, oh, you and your husband should come, because he knew that I had a baby and whatnot. He's like, oh, you and your husband should come and help celebrate. I was like, well, I don't have one of those anymore. And his ears went, what? It was like, what? Apparently before I had started coming to his class, he had seen me around and started asking like, who's that Cindy? And they were like, oh, you can't have her because like she's married, whatever. But as soon as I said that, he would come up to me like after every class, like, so how are you? What's happening? And just chat. And then, he asked me out and I was like, and it was a group date. So it was like a group date. So I would feel comfortable. And then after that, he called me and we just talked for like hours and hours that night. And I was like, okay. So we started to like date. But as you say, I was still like, man, no way. Like, when's the other shoe going to fall off? Well, let me tell you something. This is how wonderful my husband is. We dated for 15 years before I would
Okay.
say, before I would
Well,
literally.
I'm sure I'm sure you were sure after that time. Although they could change. They could change, but I don't think after 15 years.
It was interesting because so here's the thing. My husband now is probably, and he used to tell me I'm a man amongst men. He gave me the space and the time and the encouragement to do the deep inner work that I did. So he had the patience and persistence to say, I love you. I love all of you. You need to love all of you. Now, what guy would hang around all of this time? And let me tell you, there were so many times when I would like try to push him away because I would feel like, oh my God, okay. I started to trust, and then it would be like, no. And I would like, just this unconscious, and I would push him away. Like, who hangs in there for that length of time? But he was like, I knew you were the one for me. And so
Wow.
he just, it's patience and kindness and compassion and love, and so that was really, I think, what I needed that time, and the encouragement, right? I mean, he was there to give me the reassurance that I'm not walking away. Yeah, I mean, so it took a really long time.
So what do you say to people that haven't had that experience, that are single, they've got a child? Most of the women that I come across are also struggling financially because they don't have that partner that can work and watch. They can't do both. What would you say to them?
First and
What do you
foremost,
say to
yeah, you have to do inner work. You don't even think about anything else. First of all, you have to like make time for yourself, because the first thing you do is like you wrap everything around the children then, right? Because again, all these worries and whatnot, and you tuck so many feelings. Get help. Build a support system, because part of my issue back then is that I was afraid to ask for help because I was afraid of being seen weak. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like I wanted to be this strong, I put on this strong facade and I armored up. It's okay to ask for help. So I think there's still a lot of women out there that are afraid to ask for help. Do that. Get the support. Do the inner work. You have to do the inner work. Get resourceful. I didn't have the support, so it's like you have to really then look for ways of getting resourceful, and reach out to other women. Again, that's why what I offer to women is the support, the community, so that you don't feel like you're all alone in this. Because once that happens, then it's like you kind of shut down in so many different ways if you feel like you're all alone in it. But
Well, I
that's it.
find
I
that,
mean, inner
yeah,
work and getting a support system.
yeah. Yeah, I find a lot of women don't like to ask for help because when they've asked in the past, they never got it. So there's the already underlying assumption that they're not going to get it or in the way that they need. And again, there is strength in vulnerability.
It is. There's so much strength in vulnerability and persistence, right? Because just because you don't get it the first time around, the type of aid or support you think you want, you got to keep putting yourself out there. And so again, as you say, there's so much strength in vulnerability. But if you're like, well, I tried once and it didn't
Yeah,
work out, and then you shut back down and you close yourself back off, well, you're going to stay shut down, right? And
yeah,
so to me, it's also that patience and persistence to like keep moving forward, keep asking.
yeah. So how do you help your clients to move forward?
Again, I think the big thing is just providing. So I have actually a 12-week program that I offer. It's a group coaching program. I work one-on-one with women as well. And I actually I give them a free consultation and find out where are they, what do they need, and then I'll just offer up what I do. big thing is, again, 12-week program where we focus in on inner work. And the inner work is, and so for those people out there that understand the chakra system, because I weave in some of my other modalities, but I focus in on basically the first 4 chakras, because that's where all the empowerment energy resides. And
Yep.
so we basically do, I incorporate tapping into it as well. I will incorporate, guided meditation, breathing techniques. So I use all of what I have, my arsenal, if you will, of techniques or whatnot, but really focus in on rebuilding strength. How do you re-engage your passion? How do you re-engage your personal power? And then how do you renew your heart? Because a lot of us that have gone through that, again, renewing your heart, how do you give yourself the kindness and compassion you deserve? Because we actually go into this whole, I made a mistake, then I start shooting on myself, shaming myself. I feel guilty because, so you go into this whole should, shame, guilt cycle. How do I get out of that? So I built the program to focus in on those 4 pillars, if you will, so that they can really come into this place of like calm and feeling more confident and having courage, and compassion for themselves.
Yeah, it's like the yoga session you had where you actually just finally sat down and connected with you
Yeah.
and breathed into you and felt grounded and in flow. Because if they're in a session with you, they don't have anywhere to go. They can't really run.
Yeah,
They
they can't.
would be facing themselves, right?
Yeah. So again, like I do the one-on-one, I got to tell you though, the group coaching is phenomenal. And I really try to encourage clients to come into a group where I know that sometimes, well, I don't know. I keep the groups really small. There's no more than 5 women. I want that intimate circle of safety so that, and we set rules, like it's not a judgment place. So nobody's pointing fingers, well, you should have done this or you should have done that. We set the ground rules to say, no, you're coming here into a judge-free zone so that you can literally build up your inner confidence and strength. And when you're in a group like that, then you don't feel so all alone. And the stories that are shared, like everybody's got a different story, right? But the themes are all the same. And so once you start realizing, oh my gosh, she went through that, or it's my story is a little bit different, but yeah, man, you know what? I got into that whole perfectionism thing too. I've been doing this whole self-worth thing too. Oh my gosh, I have built this wall of armor. I don't want to be seen as vulnerable. So all of the stories combined, but it's all the same stuff. So then it opens up for more sharing. Oh, I can release more of where I've been at, because sometimes it's scary to share your story, right?
Oh, yes. So here's a question, and I find that because I do spiritual work, is that a lot of my clients are also empaths. And I find that empaths tend to attract the toxic relationships, of course. So which means that you'd have the same kind of person in your groups. And they would actually see that that's also something we all have in common, is we're the good ones. You want to do everything right and perfect and don't make waves. And life is so much drama when you're in a toxic relationship that afterwards you don't want drama. You just want quiet and peace. But then with that comes boredom. And so you can't allow yourself to be exposed to anything that's fun, because that could be dangerous, and you've also had to train yourself.
Good point. God, Natasha. Yeah. Yeah. It is so true, right? You are afraid to like experience joy. Even experience joy. Fun's the entree into that, right? But it's scary to even want to experience joy because everything's just been so toxic. Again, it comes down to like trusting that. But we talk about that too, just in terms of, you're right, when you are a highly empathic person, right? Your feelers are so out there, so you're absorbing everybody else's energy. So we talk about ways that, again, the more that you do your inner work, you can build that inner resilience so that you can basically create your energetic, if you will, bubble around you, kind of protect you from that toxic environment. So like, what are the things that you need to do? I always talk about the well, right? If we look at ourselves as a big well of water, and empaths, we typically are like, let's give out cups of water. Everybody needs a cup of water, and we give and we give and we give and we give. And then what happens is we need a cup of water, right? We're like so spent. And then we go to our well and it's bone diggity dry. and no one else around us is giving us a cup of water. And so to me, it's like, that's great to want to be a giver, but you have to give to yourself. And literally, you have to give to yourself first. And so many women are like, they're not even on their list, right? Let alone at the top of their list. And so this is where you have to really fill your well and again, experience the fun, experience the joy. Again, putting yourself out there in different ways, but again, building these different types of muscles, if you will, so that your well is always full. So that, yeah, you can still get out a cup of water, but you're
Yeah,
still
that
whole within your,
I
yeah,
really like that analogy. Yeah, because okay, so if you are having a group program and you're sharing that with everybody, how would they, if they didn't know you and they didn't have any support and they maybe didn't have money, what would you say to people that actually are still at that point where they're still trying to figure things out? And I agree with you. You can only figure it out to a point. There comes a time where you actually do need that extra support because you can't see from the inside objectively what's actually going on. But what would you say to people like that are looking for some like a lifeline?
a lifeline. Well, one of the things I offer is get a free consultation. So if somebody needed like a little mini session, I always offer a free one. But I would say, look to you can go online. There's so many resources online. So, I mean, look online for, again, support groups. There are communities out there that have support groups for women that have gone through divorce. There are support groups out there for women that have been in toxic relationships where their partner has been a narcissist. There's so many tools out there now, whereas, again, 30 some odd years ago, we didn't have any of that. That's why it took me so long to like navigate this process. That's why I want to offer women, there are ways that you can, again, move through this faster, right? And with greater ease than there has ever been in the past. You have to actually do a little research in terms of like the resources out there, but there are plenty out there. And so again, there are different podcasts, books, things that there's a lot of freebies out there that you can actually just start to like listen to and enrich yourself in that way, which the cost is like literally zero. Right? So you don't have to invest a whole lot. But I also encourage women, get resourceful. You would be surprised at literally how resourceful you can get, and you have that potential within you. And so again, this is where, again, getting into a community where they're bolstering you up, giving you that, yes, you can do this. Again, for me, it was like, okay, I want to do something that's going to give me some physical charge, a way to release stress, and also get paid for it. Now, did I have to save up some money to like become a aerobics instructor? But yeah, it took me a little bit of time, but I set that goal and I focused on it, and just a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and then boom, it just led me down to this whole, again, journey and path. So I just encourage women that there is a lot out there that you can tap into that will actually cost you $0. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's not really a lack of resources, it's more a lack of resourcefulness. And also if you find yourself having given your power to somebody else financially, then you have to reclaim that. And you could be years behind, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you're a little bit behind. And some people are behind and some are ahead. It's just where you are in your journey.
Right. And again, as you just said, that's perfectly said. You're just on a different part of the path in your own journey. And I'll tell you the one thing that, being in a financial, straight, so to speak, I did have a full-time job, which was fantastic. And so, I felt very fortunate about that. It still wasn't enough. I can tell you that it still wasn't enough to like really provide the way I wanted to provide, but you just keep going, just keep going one step at a time, keep putting one foot in front of the other. And opportunities, I think part of this whole thing from a spiritual perspective too, is literally just having the faith and trusting the universe, putting it out there to however you however you connect with the divine, whether you call it God, spirit, source, universe, having that part of pulling that in as part of you, I think will really help in terms of taking those steps and surprisingly, synchronicity, not even so much surprisingly, but you end up being this flow with life and opportunities will start to come to you. Like ask, talk to God, talk to your angels, however you describe it for you, ask for it. I'm looking for help. I need help right now. Show me the next person that I need to meet. What's the next step that I need to take? And then going within, right? And just listening, trusting yourself, just listening and trusting to your own heart and your own intuition, and things will start to come to you. And then just say yes. Just start to say yes instead of blocking and saying, oh, no, 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 because that's the first instinct, right? It's like, oh, that can't be right. That can't be true. Say a little yes. Say a little yes and just see what happens.
And I think that is also part of being hurt. It's almost withdrawing. If you are an empath and you're taking on all the energy, it's like, well, it's just too much. I don't want any of it. But it's more about being discerning than just blocking everything. And I think you lose your ability to be discerning because you thought you knew the person you were marrying. And then it turned out that you didn't know the person. So then you don't trust your own instincts. And I think it just becomes a vicious cycle. And I agree, you ask for help, but who do you ask it from? Get to know who you're asking. If you're asking the angels is different to if you're asking your neighbor.
Right.
Who you don't know.
Both, right? Right, exactly. I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's still that putting yourself out there, but you just said something really important. It's that whole, again, trusting yourself. It's like, gosh, again, I shoulda, I didn't see anything wrong with me. Now I'm afraid to even trust my instincts. So it takes time. It does. It just takes some time and patience with yourself, but keep going. You can do this. Find the people. Again, to me, it's really finding the people that are going to understand what you're going through and give you that bolster of confidence to keep going.
Do you find that a lot more people are getting into toxic relationships, or do you think that it's something that's just being highlighted that we weren't aware of before?
Oh, I think it's the latter. I think that if we go back to, again, the programming, as you say, there's so much generational programming, and I think that we are actually in a really sweet spot right now in time that in our country, there's just so much polar opposites right now. And so I think that, again, universe is answering in a way with just opening up so much more in terms of knowledge. We're seeing it more, right? And so people are having more of an awareness now. I think it's always been there. I think it's always been there. But now it's just, we're bringing things to light so that people can see, especially I think women. I mean, just women in general have been handed so many negative messages. I mean, from when we're little all the way up into adulthood, right? I mean, of how we're supposed to behave, what's the proper way that we're supposed to behave. So we're conditioned to behave in these ways. And as you say, high empaths naturally attract narcissists, I think. Yeah.
Well, they see somebody who's willing to give everything. So who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want somebody who's not going to ask for anything? You're an easy target. But I actually have a theory. I believe that we are attracted to narcissists as well. It's both ways because it's what we're familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I think it comes from conditioning, but then if you're a high empath, you plug right into that, right? You plug right in.
They have the charisma, they're the fun loving, they do all the things you would never allow yourself to do. And you do have an amazing time when you first meet them. But the fact that you can't sustain it, they might even push you for more. You could think, well, that's great for a short time, but I'm not going to continue. And for them, it's the opposite. And then they say, you changed.
Right, exactly. Oh, and they're never wrong, right? It's everybody else. You're always the one that's and you naturally take the blame, right? Because you're like that. It must be me. right? It must be me. So you mean, oh
Well,
yes, many things.
at a spiritual level, then yes, it is you, but not in the way that they're saying it.
Yeah,
It's
right,
more the
exactly.
fact that you're allowed it because you don't like confrontation, you don't like to, they confound you when they come up with these weird things that they say when they gaslight you. So your brain goes quiet, you don't know what to say in return, you get confused. So yeah,
Right,
all
and
these nasty
again, you
things.
bring it on. It must be me, right? I must be crazy for thinking, why am I thinking this way? I mean, why am I? Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But like to me, it comes back to the mother wound. And I think you mentioned the 50s family.
Yeah.
I think the baby boomers, the 50s family for women had it the worst because these were women that wanted to go to work. And the men said, well, that you want that, but I wanted a wife that's staying at home. So if you are going to work, it's going to be at your cost. And so you work for less and you get punished for it.
Yeah.
And so because they were doing something they really wanted, they had to come home and smile and pretend they were happy and be super mom. And then you as a child get brought up in a family like that and you see your mom being super mom and you think, well, I have to be that too because she did it.
Yep.
So then if you don't do it, then there must be something wrong with you, right? Because
Absolutely. Spot on.
it's just like and it's an ancestral thing. It's a collective thing. And I think now that's why, I mean, I noticed my daughter's 26 and my son is 16. They don't want to do anything that I tell them to do. And not because they're not naughty people or, I just think they've seen through that. And they say, well, if that might have worked for you, but we're not doing that. We're not going to people please because they've seen through that. And yeah, we didn't, I guess. I think that, and there's a lot of people wounded. And I think the people that are wounded are the ones who have the greatest to offer because they've seen through the illusion of what's going on in society because we're very observant. We're able to see patterns that are dysfunctional. And if you could find your self-worth, and I think that is actually the key, as you said, if you could find your self-worth, then you teach others to do the same. We could have such a different society. And it starts, I've got a theory, and I did discuss it with somebody else the other day, is don't you think that empaths are actually like the forerunners to the rest of the world kind of catching on? Because the empaths were the first ones to see what's going on. And so they learned because of the trauma to recognize it everywhere else, where the rest of the people are still catching on. You think that? I
Yeah,
see
I
that,
would
but
agree.
I'm
I would
asking.
agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. Because I think you're right. I mean, it's when you're wounded, it's a heart-opening event, right? That's how I look at it. When you have experience some type of trauma, it's a heart-opening event for you. And so you have a choice at that point, right? You either are going to like work through that or completely shut down, right? So some people will like spiral
Yeah.
all the way down, whatever. But to me, I look at it, it's an opportunity, right? And we don't think of it as an opportunity at the time, obviously. But yeah, I think that empaths really are the front runners in that because when you have that heart opening event, again, this is where I think all the healing can happen. And so then we'll be the healers that bring everybody else along, and show them the way, so to speak, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me, aren't you sorry that got married? Because I mean, I've had a few toxic relationships. And I've said, no, they've been my greatest teacher. The only regret that I had was that I stayed so long. And even then, that was the right time. So even that, I mean, you don't really, time is eternal anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, not even that, I guess.
And I think that's the biggest, what you just said too. It's a teaching moment, right? And so if we look at it, and this is part of what I, tell all the women I work with too, is that yes, it was a trauma, but what's the gift in it? If you can start to flip things around and look at like, what's the gift? What's the lesson that you can take forward? Because to me, I look at it this way too, is that the universe is going to keep going, hitting us over the head until we get it. Did you get it yet? Did you get it yet? Keep throwing you in these different scenarios. It seems different, but the lesson is the same lesson. So it's like whack you on the head again. Did you get it just yet? And so if you can start to look at that trauma, as you say, it's a teachable moment, it's a learning moment, there's a lesson, there's a gift in that. There's a gift for you to say, wow, I have an opportunity here to like really grow and evolve into the next best version of myself and take that lesson along with me so that now I can be a person that shares it with the next person that needs it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you want to help somebody, the best way to do it is to have been there yourself, been in the
Yeah.
field, know what is, what's going to happen. You're not speaking from an outsider who has no experience in it at all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't get that. But yeah, I do. I get that totally. Because you do, if even just the fact that somebody's cheating, it kind of feels like there must be something about you that made him, as your father said, he was just your voice, right? Speaking out loud.
Ooh, I
Saying,
love what you just said there. I love that. Wow, isn't that an insight?
see, he was just saying what you were thinking on the inside. And then you
Yeah,
say, how dare he say that? But he actually voiced it,
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
And but the thing is, it's not that you did something wrong, it's that you allow them to be more important than you. And and I say, if you ask God for strength, then he drops a block of concrete on you. So it's never in the way you ask, but it's the way you need.
Yeah, I mean, you really do. If you want to, again, if you want to be your best self, I think for anyone else, you really have to be your best self for you first. You really do. And so, as you say, I mean, it really means you got to love yourself, flaws and all. When you can get, I think, to that point, you really get to that point where it's like, yep, I make a, whatever you call it, deem it a mistake, fine. To me, it's mistakes are just lessons again that take us to the next version. But when you can get to that point where you can accept every side of yourself, because what bottom line is we have every single facet within us, right? The good, the bad, the ugly. We all have it within us. I think in just different degrees. It's either dialed way up or it's dialed way down. And so I think that when we can get to that place and just accept all of that, and give
Yeah.
ourselves the kindness and compassion that we truly do deserve, I think then we're in a really good place to really, I think, really facilitate healing in others, really help them along, so that they're in that place too.
Yeah, I mean, judgment starts with self.
Yeah.
How can you be loved if you don't love you? You won't allow it.
Yeah. Well, it's easy though, right? To say, well, but wait a minute. I love my kids, right? I mean, that's the first thing that kind of comes out. It's like, well, wait. What do you mean I don't love myself? I mean, I'm showing I love my kids. No. It's like, let's not get confused here of like what this means. Self-love is very internal. It's very deep. In fact, I had a conversation the other day with a woman. She's like, well, self-care is self-love. And I'm like, I think self-care is actually a lead-in to self-love because I can go to the gym and work out. That's self-care. Or I can eat healthy. That's self-care. But do I really love myself, or am I still criticizing and judging my body because it's like, oh my God, I feel fat, right? So that's why I'm going to the gym, but I'm calling it self-care, right?
Yeah,
But I
totally.
still don't really love me fully for who I am. And so I think there's a distinction there between self-care and self-love. I think self-care can be a lead into it, but self-love to me is really, really deeper. And as you said, that's that place where we don't judge ourselves anymore, or we might still have a moment of it. Come on, let's be real here. We're human beings.
Yep.
Judgment still may come up. Oh, I wish I didn't do that, right? Or I shouldn't have done that. But then if we can come back inside and say, okay, it happened, and I'm going to love myself anyway. And I tell my women that too, because I mean, there are times, I love my mother to death, but she is the one person that just will like, oh, she can get me, frustrated so quickly. And so I know that, I've done so much work on this of like being in my grounded self and being more calm so that I'm not reacting, but I'm actually responding. It's very distinct difference in terms of whether I'm in a reactive mode or whether I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because that's what's happening, or if I'm really grounded in myself. And so I had a conversation with, this was a couple of months ago, and I just, oh my God, she just pushed my buttons in just the right way. And I tweaked out and I like got frustrated and raised my voice. And I was like, oh my God, and I got off the phone and I was like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. And so I started going into the should, shame, guilt cycle. And then I sat back and I used my tool tapping and I just started tapping on my collarbone going, you know what? It happened. And I'm just going to give myself some love right now. And I breathed, and I put my hands over my heart and just did a little, yeah, I'm just going to bring in some love right now because guess what? I am human. I am perfectly imperfect. And it happened. And I course corrected immediately. I called my mom right back up and I said, I just want you to know I love you. I didn't have to give her a big explanation of like what happened and why and da da da. No, I just needed to tell her that I just want to let you know how much I love you. And that was it. Hung up, course corrected. I felt really good, took in self-love, gave her some more love, and so that was the way of just instantaneously flipping the script back into a place of accepting and knowing that, yeah, we're still going to trip up. We're still going to make mistakes. And we still might have a moment of judgment.
It's just more work to do, but
Well, it doesn't
it's
stop.
a journey.
That's the big
It's a
thing. It
journey,
doesn't stop, right?
I mean, we've got lifetimes to heal. So,
Exactly.
and again, as you say, we're just human. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean,
And sometimes people might want to push your button just because they enjoy it.
oh yeah, for sure, right? Some people know what kind of button they can push on you. Brr, just get it right there. And so when you can start to, I guess, tune into what are your buttons, I think that's a big thing too. That's a big lesson is start to tune into, and again, to me, I always come back to the body first. Again, through all of my training, it's like, where do you feel it in your body? Right? When you get triggered, where are you feeling it? Is it me? I always feel it in my solar plexus. I like get this like twisting knot, right in my chest. And I'm like, oh, okay, tune into that feeling. And now what do I need to do immediately to bring myself back into that grounded place? Sometimes it's I gotta leave, I can't talk right now, I gotta go, boom, dunk, I gotta go and get myself back into that grounded place. Or again, maybe it's just taking a few deep breaths. I've had people when I was in the working world where it was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And so it'd be like, okay, I see what's happening here. I feel it. And I would just start to breathe. I would just focus in. They're still talking to me, right? But I'm focusing in on just my breathing right now. Because I'm focusing in on, okay, you can react right now. Is that who you want to be in this moment? Is that really who you want to be? And I would just breathe and, okay, patience. I don't have to jump right in and say anything and take my time to just start to listen and then respond, right?
Yeah, that's great because it does give you that bit of time.
Yeah.
And I also find when you're triggered, you immediately go into your defense mechanism, which is your old way of dealing with things. So buying that little bit of time just allows you to start thinking of a new way to react, or as you say, to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing too, so I mean, just talking about the whole reaction and being in fight or flight, because I really kind of go right into the physiology, because you're right, we're in that defense mechanism at that point too. And so we just kind of like blurt and whatever our programming has dictated, in terms of like, this is how so-and-so behaved in my life. I mean, that's exactly what we do. The other piece of it though, is that whole, when we get into judgment, I just want to tangent to that a little bit, because one of the tools that I give to the gals I work with too is, that judgment voice, that inner critic, whatever you want to call it. I have them name it, because we get into, I call it the old brain. I named my little inner critic the stealthy little ninja who like sits up in the corner and then slides down a little cobweb when I least expect it, jumps on my shoulder and starts, all this stuff in my brain. So, I mean, if you can start to name that, so that again, when you start to feel the stuff coming up, it's like, oh yeah, that's who's coming up. That's who's coming to play right now. And it kind of puts it then outside of you for a moment. So again, gives you a little bit of time and space to collect and come back into who you really are.
Yeah, I love that. And it is because people tend to identify with the emotion and they think that's who I am. And they don't realize it's just a feeling they're having right now, which is a memory of something that happened in the past. And
Mhm.
you can change the way you react or respond to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Give it a different name.
Yeah.
It's not
Give it
easy.
a different name. Name her. Name her. Give her a name.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me, where could people get hold of you if they need to? I'll obviously post your links below and but where would they
Yeah.
be able
So,
to
I
get?
mean, my business name is Tranquil Heart Wellness. So I've got a website, it's tranquilheartwellness, all one word.com. You can reach me at cindy@tranquilheartwellness.com. So you can email me. I mean, reach out. Like I said, I've got a Calendly link as well. If I'm on Instagram, so it's under at Tranquil Heart Wellness. So that's my Instagram. I'm on Facebook as well. Again, it's all under Tranquil Heart Wellness. Um, there's a link, I have a link tree, so you can go into my links. I have a calendar, so you can actually book a free session with me, consultation. And yeah, so there's lots of ways that you can get in touch with me.
Lovely, great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your insight. I love the fact that you're able to share this information with everybody because more and more people I find are needing it, and they're at a point where they actually just do want to do something about it. I think they're tired of reading the books and watching the YouTube videos, and actually just want to do that inner work because that is where it starts. It starts with you. It doesn't start with trying to change the outside.
Yeah.
That's a never-ending job.
That never really works, right? I mean, you're right. It starts inside. When you change inside, everything naturally will change outside for you.
Yeah,
So
and also I think what happens is people were initially might not be aware of how that works, but that's what you guide them through. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. The more able you're able to control your environment so that it doesn't control you. And then you have that aha moment that said, I wish I'd known this before. Why didn't anyone tell me? Well, they did, but you weren't ready.
and it takes the three P's, right? I mean, it's practice. You have to practice this stuff. It's like you're learning something new. So just come into this with that student mentality. I'm learning something new again. So it's the practice, patience, right? We have to have patience that it's going to happen. I'll do four P's, persistence, keep going, and then recognize it's a process. You're going to go two steps forward and you might have a step back, and it's okay. But so I look at it this way, right? It's like two steps forward. Now I have a step back, but guess what? Now you're here. And now I take a
Like
couple more steps forward and maybe I have a step back, but now I'm here. So your starting point is you're never, ever going all the way back to where you were. You're always moving the needle forward. So it just takes time and
it's
you can
true.
do it.
You can't unsee something you've seen. You'll never go
Yeah.
back to that. And a lot of my clients as well say to me, I wish I had that innocence that I used to have. And I say, but you've replaced it with wisdom. You can't, is that not a gift in itself? Because you can be naive, but then you're at the mercy of what anybody just gives to you. And at some point you want the wisdom. And maybe it's good to be innocent.
Oh, I
Sometimes I
love
wish
it. It's so beautiful what you just said. I absolutely love that. Lost innocence, but gained wisdom. And who doesn't want to have wisdom?
well, I mean, isn't that the way to go? How many people have just fallen for something and then it cost them in whatever way, whether it's a financial deal they did or in a relationship, you know? But it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey. And I think it's a part of the consciousness waking up to be able to be more aware of what's going on in your environment. And not everybody has your best interests at heart. Not everybody wants the best for you. And it's to be able to discern who are those people. But if you know how to recognize an empath, there's a good start because they won't walk all over you. They're just not built that way. So yeah.
Again, those are going to be your support system, right? They're going to be
Yeah.
the people that are going to keep trying to lift you up, lift you up. And so those are the
Yeah.
people you want to hang around with. And you're right. It's like it's interesting because I think you really do it. The discernment is so important because you want to strip those people out of your life, right? You really need to again, oh, they've been this great friend of mine or whatever. No, really, they haven't been. And it's okay. It's okay. Recognize too that certain relationships, they're there. It's teacher and student always, right? You're there to either teach them something or you're there to learn something from them. And it doesn't mean that it needs to be a lifelong commitment there. It could be like you've learned everything that you've learned from them. And it's not that you're like bashing them, casting them aside. It's like, I'm ready for something else, right? I'm ready to go on to the next step. And so it's not about this discarding in a hurtful, hateful way, if you will. It's just saying, I'm ready for something different now. And you're not really in it fitting into where I need to be now. And it's okay. And it's actually okay.
It is okay. And they might join you up at a later stage and they might not. And that's also okay.
Right.
Yeah. Because if you think how many different experiences we've had, it's impossible to find somebody that's in complete alignment with where you are anyway.
Yeah, exactly. There's always one more step, right?
And that, I used to always think, I must get life done. I must get it done. And then I realized, well, it's never going to get done. And even if it was done, there's now the next version. So what am I in a rush for? Why am I in a hurry to get this perfectly?
Exactly. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, like I said, it's always one more step. We're always going to continue learning. There's always going to be something else that pops up that pulls us a step back. But we gain our momentum much quicker, right? So even if you do that step back, it's like, oh, you see it so much quicker than you ever would have before because that awareness, you've built such a muscle with that awareness that it's so much easier to course correct immediately. Yeah.
Well, that's what the point is, right, of doing the work. Because then you've built that muscle, you know exactly what needs to be, and you know where your mind has been. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Cindy. It was great to meet you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I mean, this was a pleasure. My gosh, I know we kind of like went all over the place, but I love it. It's such a rich conversation to have. So hopefully it's helpful to somebody else to hear it. And, I really appreciate you inviting me here.
And thanks. And I just, for me, it's about creating awareness to the world out there, because there's so many great people offering something and people are not always aware, or they might just be stuck in their bubble and not realize how much they are stuck in their bubble, and it could just be one sentence. It could be just one thing that they heard that would change something in their mind or in their life that could make the change. So, yeah.
Right. Anyway, golden nugget.
Is that one. And I mean, that's often why I read books, because, I once had a partner who said, why do you read so many books? They're all on the same subject. I said, they're not. There might just be one thing in this book that I did not read in any of the others, or it just kind of formulates it in a way that I really get my head around it.
Yeah.
So, no, it's not always the same.
For sure.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Have a magic day and have a magic Christmas. And I'll chat to you soon. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Much love to you. Happy holidays.
Bye.